Welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever stopped to wonder why so many of the books we call classics were written by, well, men? Or how just one idea can totally change the way we read, forever? Today, we're diving into the story of American feminist literary criticism. This was a movement that didn't just add a few women to the syllabus, it completely rewrote the rules of the game.
All right, let's set the scene. It's the 1960s. And for so many American women, there was this strange feeling, a kind of quiet desperation. On the surface, everything looked fine, but underneath, there was what this quote calls the problem that has no name. It's this deep, unsettling sense that you're being held back, kept from becoming who you're meant to be, all because you're living out a role someone else wrote for you.
You know, that kind of private frustration can only stay private for so long before it just has to explode. And the 1960s, the air was already electric with the civil rights movement, which gave people a real roadmap for how to challenge the system. Then boom, 1963, Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, just hits the scene. It takes that unnamed problem, gives it a name, and suddenly it's not just a personal feeling anymore. It's a national conversation. It's a movement.
And what is just incredible is how fast everything happened. Just look at this timeline. It's an absolute explosion of ideas. Friedan kicks the door open in 63, and then bam, 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 you get these landmark texts, one after another. Thinkers like Millett and Firestone aren't just commenting, they're building the entire intellectual framework for a revolution in under a decade. It's just staggering.
Okay, so you've got the energy, you've got the momentum. But to really fight a revolution, you need more than just passion. You need a new vocabulary. The old ways of talking about the world just weren't cutting it anymore. They couldn't describe the power structures these women were starting to see so clearly, so they had to invent new tools, new words, to take the world apart and understand how it was built.
And this, right here, this is one of the most powerful game-changing ideas to come out of the whole movement, the idea that we have to separate biological sex from socially constructed gender. Just let that sink in for a second. What it means is that all the things we're told women should be or how they should act isn't baked into our DNA. It's a cultural script. And the best part about a script? It can be rewritten.
So, once you have that new lens, a word like patriarchy totally changes. It stops being this vague idea of, oh, that's just how things are, and it becomes a political system. You can see it as an actual institution, one designed to keep power in the hands of men. And what's one of its most powerful tools? Culture. All those books and stories that we grow up with. The ones that subtly teach us about the world and, a woman's place in it.
Okay, so with these new concepts of gender and patriarchy in their toolbox, something really fascinating started to happen. The focus shifted. It wasn't just about criticizing how male authors wrote about women anymore. No, it became an active search, almost like a form of literary archaeology, to go back and dig up this entire lost tradition of women writers who'd been ignored or just plain erased by history.
And all of a sudden, these incredible books start popping up. Works like The Mad Woman in the Attic literally started building a whole new section in the Library of Literary History, one packed with these brilliant forgotten women. But as this new canon started to take shape, a new question came up. Is there a bigger pattern here? Can we actually map out the evolution of this hidden tradition? And that is exactly what Elaine Schaller set out to do.
So, Shalter came up with this really elegant three-phase model to explain it all. First, she said you have the feminine phase. This is where women were basically writing by the rules of the male literary world. Then you get the feminist phase, a period of protest, of pushing back against those rules. And finally, you arrive at the female phase, where it's all about self-discovery and carving out a space for a uniquely female voice.
But the story doesn't stop there, not by a long shot. Because like any truly powerful idea, feminist criticism kept evolving. Once that initial foundation was in place, the movement started to look in the mirror. It began asking itself much harder questions, challenging its own assumptions, and becoming way more complex.
And the conversation just got so much richer, Critics started tackling these really big questions, like, is there such a thing as a female language, a way of writing that's fundamentally different from the male tradition? How does feminism connect with these huge philosophical movements happening at the same time? The movement was growing up, and these were its fascinating growing pains.
And here's where we get to what is maybe the most important evolution of all. A challenge that came from inside the movement itself. For all of its amazing, groundbreaking work, the early movement had a pretty big blind spot. It mainly focused on the experiences of white, middle-class women.
And so this powerful, necessary call came from other women to ask, hey, whose feminism are we talking about here? And who's being left out of the picture?
This is really where thinkers like Barbara Smith and Alice Walker became absolutely essential. When you read something like In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, you realize they weren't just adding more voices to the choir, they were weaving completely new histories. They showed the world that womanhood isn't just one single story. It's this beautiful, complex tapestry. And by searching for their own roots, as this quote so beautifully puts it, they ended up making the garden bigger and more beautiful for everyone.
So when you look back, this whole journey, from a quiet problem with no name to this dynamic, self-questioning field of study, it really did change everything. It gave us a new language to ask new questions and the tools to find new answers. So the next time you pick up a book, or even just watch a movie, think about it. The way you see that story has been shaped by the legacy of these critics. And it leaves us all with a pretty big question. What other stories are still out there, just waiting to be told?